From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the annual meeting of the Potomac Technical Processing Librarians. My name is Mark Winnick, and I've had the pleasure of serving as the PTPL chair for 2015. And today marks our 91st meeting as a group devoted to the technical side of supporting the informational needs of school children, university students, the legal profession, religious communities, the military, the marginalized, and everyone in between. And before we get the day's proceedings underway, I'll also get the thanks out of the way. And I would like to express my deepest debt of gratitude to the 2015 PTPL Advisory Board. If you're on the board, could you please stand up just so people can recognize you? Thank you. Not only have they made each meeting a pleasure, they have each provided their unique talents to make PTPL a stronger organization in this year and for the future. And I'd especially like to thank the Executive Committee, Vice Chair Tiffany Wilson, Past Chair Linda Geisler, Secretary Sue Nielsen, and Treasurer Linda Worth. We've especially to thank Linda Geisler. Linda returned to the PTPL Advisory Board when we were in need of an executive 2 years ago. Not only has she provided her services faithfully, she used her good offices to ensure that we had a monthly meeting place here in the Madison building and took the lead on coordinating the space and catering required for today's meeting. And I also want to thank Bobby Reeves, our webmaster, who keeps the website and the conference registration running year after year without any complaint. And Kerry, I hope that's reflected on his annual review every year. So for your convenience, Wi-Fi is provided by the Library of Congress. The network name is LOC Guest, and you won't need a username and password, but you will have to assent to the terms and conditions. Restrooms are located out the main entrance of the Montpelier room across from the elevators down the hall on the right. There's a scheduled 15-minute break in the proceedings at 11 a.m., and luncheon will be served from 12:15 to 1:15 in this room with vegetarian options available. And if you don't keep to a vegetarian diet, we ask that you ensure that there are plenty of such options available for those who do. And finally, just for the next few minutes, there are sign-up sheets available at the registration table for the optional Library of Congress tour immediately after the meeting. And so the tour is complimentary, but the space is limited, and we have to provide the numbers to the docents early, so please make sure and pre-register if you are interested in that. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Dorothea Salo. Dorothea is a faculty associate in the School of Library and Information Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. At Madison, she teaches organization of information, database design, and surprisingly XML and linked data. She has presented internationally on linked data and data curation, among other topics. Prior to her move to Wisconsin, she spent 2 years as a digital repository services librarian at George Mason University in Fairfax. And please join me in welcoming Dorothea Salo.
We're doing the usual switching laptops today. While we're waiting, I actually personally would like to thank Linda for hosting me. It's very, very gracious, and I so appreciate it. And thank you, all of you, for the wonderful welcome I've had here today. So I am Dorothea Salo, and I am not, nor have I ever been, a cataloger. Though I'm not sure, I may be one of the last generation of library school students who is actually required to take a cataloging course. I don't know. I just know that we at the iSchool at UW-Madison are doing one of our periodic major curriculum revisions. And current odds are that we're keeping the core organization of information course because that's core. we're just changing it to de-emphasize MARC cataloging a bit in order to include more material that's relevant to non-MARC environments, because that's where an increasing number of our students are going. So interesting times, not that they're ever not. So curriculum revisions, they are never fun. They eat everybody's time for months on end. They always cause bureaucratic hassles out the wazoo. For a while, you have to deal with two different incompatible curricula and remember which rules apply to which student you're trying to advise. At the moment, next week's advising week, so it's on my mind. And it's a mess. So, why do we do this to ourselves? Right? Why do we bother if it's such an awful hassle? And this is my answer. Quia faciendum est, because it must be done. Just in Latin, it kind of sounds cooler. We at the iSchool cannot just sit back and do what we've always done just because we've always done it that way, not when the world that our graduates are needing to fit into is way different from what it was when we built the old curriculum. And it doesn't mean we did a bad job on the old curriculum. I don't think we did. It's just that the world has changed out from under it. So we have to change the curriculum. We don't have to enjoy it. We just have to do it because it must be done. Not entirely coincidentally, that's kind of how I feel about the move away from MARC. It feels to me like a lot of the library profession has spent at least half a decade on the question, cur faciendum est, or why must it be done? And even though this question sounds really cool in Latin, I have completely lost patience with it. Don't even tell me nobody's asking this still. I've straight up heard it just last May at a conference, totally still out there, floating in the water. And if you like water, here's some nice water. Nice harbor, really pretty, love the little lighthouse, but the thing that isn't in this pretty picture of a pretty harbor is a ship. Because the why can't we use MARC ship has sailed. It has sailed. Not even having the why do we have to change discussion today, I don't see the point. That ship has sailed. I mean, I'm next year's program planner, as it happens, for the IT division of the Special Libraries Association. And I was talking to SLA's technical services planner, Betty Landisman. Maybe some of you know her. She's local to this area. I was talking to her about a linked data session. She rolled her eyes at me and she said, can we please not, right, do yet another intro to linked data and why it's better than MARC? Can we not? I've seen a ton of those and they don't help. Okay then. If I've got catalogers yelling at me not to do this, I'm going to try not to do it. Because really the answer is exactly the same as it is for our curriculum revisions at the iSchool. Quia faciendum est, because it must be done. I do want to mention, though, because I come at technical services from an XML and metadata background rather than a MARC background, that it isn't just MARC cataloging that the bell is tolling for here. There's zero chance that XML-based metadata practice is going to stay the way it is today. Not going to happen. I already see it changing. Not even sure XML is going to stay alive as a pure metadata format, as opposed to uses like TEI for the digital humanities, EAD for archives, where you're dealing with narrative type documents that are intended for mostly for human beings. That's where XML really shines. I think those will survive, but XML for metadata, not sure. And you know, I'm actually okay with that. I'm okay with XML's decline as a metadata serialization. I never liked my nice, clean, elegant document standard getting worked over by the data engineers anyway. Don't even talk to me about XML schema. Oof. Maybe now I can have XML back for documents, the way it's supposed to be. Now I'm actually much more interested in this question. Quid faciendum est? What actually is it that must be done? What do we have to do to our catalog data and our other metadata so that it works in this world where so much has changed about how people find information? I like this question because it's pragmatic. I like this question because it's intriguingly complicated. I like it because it's nerdy in all the best ways. I like it because I'm an inveterate fiddler with things. And there's just great, huge masses of MARC and XML right there waiting to be fiddled with. And it's just another of these questions that we gotta work on or we just stay stuck, right? And I don't think it's enough to just say, well, what we have to do is we have to migrate our data from MARC and MODS and METS and the various cores, Dublin core, Darwin core, VRA core, PB core, all the cores. We have to migrate all that to linked data. Then we're done. That's skipping all the steps, right? That's an underpants gnomes approach. You know, migrate all the things to linked data, step 2, question mark, question mark, question mark, step 3, profit. Nah, that's not enough. It's like saying we have to pick up some rocks and then we'll turn them into a giant mosaic. Not enough information there. What's our mosaic design gonna be? Where's the mosaic gonna be built? Where do we find the right colored rocks and how do we cut them up if they're too big or they're not the right shape? How do we glue all the rocks down? What happens if somebody glues down a rock in the wrong place? What if there's an earthquake? So yeah, we gotta work on some process here, I think, for mosaics and certainly for our data and metadata as well. And the other reason I don't think it's quite enough to say what we have to do is migrate everything to linked data is that it assumes without proof that linked data is the ultimate destination for all of our stuff, which, yeah, right now it's the horse to bet on. I'm certainly not denying that, but I think linked data gets used as a stalking horse, sometimes a little bit of a scapegoat. It's linked data's fault. We have to change away from MARC. It's linked data's fault. All of these changes are happening to begin with. If it weren't for linked data supposedly being the new hotness, we could just stay the way we are and everything would be fine. And I don't actually think that's true. If linked data didn't exist, and believe you me, there are times I would love to wipe RDF off the face of the earth. If there were no linked data, we'd still have to make changes in how we collect and organize our catalog data and our metadata. And we have to make those changes for the same reason that we're changing our curriculum at the iSchool. The world is just plain changed out from under the old ways. And that didn't happen when the Library of Congress or the British Library or the National Library of Spain or the wonderful folks in Oslo, that didn't happen when they announced their linked data plans. The changes happened a lot earlier than that. They happened, these changes, when paper cards gave way to the web as the main way that patrons interact with library catalogs and with digital collections. And yeah, if you're there, I know there are people who are medievalists in here, so I cheated. The left-hand picture there is not actually paper, it's papyrus. But no, that's when it happened. And I mean, it's not that we didn't notice. Of course we noticed. How could you not? It's just taken a while for us to figure out what we need to do about it. Oops. Which I don't know how to say that in Latin, but oops. I think we maybe waited a little longer than we should have, but that's water under the bridge now. Leads me right back here. Quid faciendum est? What do we have to do now that the work that we do has to play nicely with computers? And not just computers, I mean, MARC was designed for computers, but networked computers, computers that can talk to one another, because the network really does kind of change the game. Where I start with my students when I teach our core Organization of Information course, I start here, Ordinatra stulta sunt, which basically means computers aren't real bright. And I mean that. Computers are not all that bright, I tell my students. You are way smarter than a computer. And I say this for a lot of reasons. One reason is knocking computers off pedestals. Not actually literally knocking computers off pedestals, though, hey, that would be kind of cool. But you know what I mean, right? A lot of my students come in to the iSchool thinking that computers are small gods. They're magical, they're capricious, they're inscrutable. they're liable to mess you up. Like Diana's about to mess up that antelope there. And I'm saying I have to get them to not think that. Because the more they understand about how computers do work, the better off they are and the better off we all are. But actually the main reason that the notion that computers aren't real bright is relevant to this talk today is that from our point of view as literate human beings, computers are not too bright in some very specific and fairly easy to understand ways. And those ways tell us actually pretty clearly what our catalog metadata and other data have to look like if we want computers to work effectively with it. And really, this is no different from how the shape and size of catalog cards and the standard size of typewritten lettering shaped how the MARC record had to look. The technology that you have available, and the card catalog, totally a technology, don't let anybody tell you it isn't. The technologies available to you shape how it makes the most sense to do things. Because different technologies are good and bad at different things and need different things to function best. That's basic design theory. If you haven't read Donald Norman's Design of Everyday Things and a couple of its sequels already, please read them. Brilliant stuff. It will explode your brain in all the best ways. So the first thing to remember about computers, and I see some people already smiling, they know where I'm going with this. The first thing to remember about computers is that text, right? The ordinary stuff that we write every day for other people to read, the text that we literate human beings read and comprehend so fast, so easily, so accurately, that we hardly have to think about it. It is all Greek to a computer, right? You knew that cliche was showing up at some point. How could I not? Computers can't read. They are functionally illiterate. If anybody in this room has a kindergarten-age child at home, your kindergartner reads and comprehends text immensely better than a computer can. So in my head, one step toward coping with illiterate computers is dealing with our addiction to textual notes. By way of example, I took these MARC 504s straight from the Library of Congress's MARC documentation, and thanks for that, by the way. If anybody here is in any way responsible for it, it is super helpful in my classroom. But for example, if a patron question that we would like our catalogs to be able to answer is, hey, I'm new to this topic. Can I get a recent book with a good bibliography, please? Right? Perfectly reasonable question. These notes being free text means that our catalogs can't actually come up with an answer. Because to get to an answer means filtering a list of books by whether they have a bibliography or not. And to do that with MARC notes, the computer has to read the text. And it's got to understand that bibliography and bibliographies and bibliographical and literature cited and sources and maybe whatever that Romanized Russian is, I'm not even sure, I didn't look it up. It's got to figure out that this all means, yes, there is some kind of bibliography in this book. And no, a computer can't just look for the existence of a 504. That's not enough, because 504s don't just note down bibliographies. They also note down indexes and maybe some other information. So straight up, the computer is not bright enough to figure this out. It can't read, much less read all the languages that we end up transcribing stuff in, especially here at the Library of Congress, right? Much less comprehend what it's reading. And that makes a lot of the stuff in our MARC records a lot less useful to patrons than it could be. Computers get yes or no. Yes or no, on or off, this they get. They're real good at that. Checkboxes are candy to computers. Computers love checkboxes. So for any conceivable criterion that we want our patrons to be able to search on or filter their results on, we pretty much got to quit recording it in text and make it a checkbox. Or, radio buttons if there's more than two options, that also works. If you get the sense from this that I really like MARC fixed fields, you're totally right. Though honestly, that Festschrift thing, that's a little weird. If a lot more of Mark had been expressed in fixed fields instead of free text, we'd be in a much, much better situation right now. Now let's say for a moment, let's pretend that the titanic arguments that we in the profession are going to have about when a book can be said to have a bibliography and what actually counts as an index, let's say we've done that. And we've drawn the best line we know how. We're still going to have to deal with this giant, horrible mass of free text that's hanging out in our 504s, in our catalogs right now, because computers aren't bright enough to understand it. Facien dem est. It's got to be done. And I don't want to get down in the weeds on this. Actually, I'd love to if we had the time, because this is exactly the kind of problem I salivate over. I'm a giant nerd, though, and not everybody is. So I just want to say this class of problem can be solved for the great mass of our records without hand editing. And of course it's got to be, because there ain't enough staff time in the universe to check all those checkboxes. And it's a thing that's got to be done for every characteristic in our free text notes that we want users, patrons to be able to filter or search on. Another serious and ugly free text problem we have in our records has to do with places where our content standards don't force us to be consistent about how we record information. You know, whatevs, we're cool, just type something, it's fine. And on catalog cards, this inconsistency didn't matter, right? Because the information was only ever going to be looked at by a human being who doesn't need the consistency to figure out what's going on the individual card. We're literate humans. We're smart. We can figure this stuff out. Computers are astoundingly literal-minded, right? You can take some text, add a space to it, and all of a sudden to the computer it's a different thing. Just a space, right? A human being wouldn't even be able to see it, but to the computer, new thing. Once again, not just a Mark thing. Consistency and Dublin Core metadata don't make me laugh. Actually, I'm more likely to cry. It's really bad out there. I mean, I once got an entire published article, Cataloging Classification Quarterly, you can look it up, out of one poor soul in the institutional repository I was running at the time. The poor guy had stuff under 8 slightly different spellings of his name. 8. Just terrible. And yeah, I fixed it as soon as I had the screenshot I needed for the article. I wasn't just going to leave it like that. But it goes to show, doesn't it? And I want to call out 2 Dublin Core things specifically, noting that you're going to find these problems a lot more places in Dublin Core. Dates, oh my gosh, dates. Dates are really important to information seekers. So it's really important that we record them consistently such that a computer can reasonably intelligently filter based on them. And oh boy, we're not there yet. We are not even close to there. Dublin Core Mark totally doesn't matter. The people who try to make not too bright computers work are tearing out their hair about the way we do dates. And we gotta fix this. Facien dem est. It's gotta be done. As for right statements, this is another one that comes from the digital collection side more than the catalog side. It's important because the people who come to our digital collections often want to use them in particular ways, and they want to know if they're allowed to. We have to be clear about what our patrons are allowed to do, and to do that, our search engines have to be able to tell which users can do what with which items, and that's all free text now, and it's a complete disaster. Europeana and the Digital Public Library of America are working on this, thankfully, bringing a little bit of reason, I hope, to this chaos. I do not envy them that job one bit. Copyright's bad enough. Free text only makes it worse. So an example of the difficulties with free text that I use in class a lot is from library software developer Bill Duber, who took a close look at what was after the ISBN in the 020 field in the catalog that he was working with, and wow, it's horrific. Just the top 20 responses over there on the left, you can completely see the inconsistency. And the more you drill down on the right, he took a look at anything that was kind of sort of hardback and he got all of those. Yeah, the more you drill down, the worse it gets. So yeah, our catalogs can't answer the very simple question, yo, this book, print or electronic or both? At least not based on the O20. And yeah, I know RDA fixes this, and yay, that's a good thing to have fixed. Bottom line though, a lot of our catalog data is just hopelessly internally inconsistent. And sometimes that's material for patrons and sometimes it isn't. I'm not saying this is the top thing that we've got to fix in our catalogs. I don't actually know what that is. That knowledge, that expertise lives with you. But when it is material, right, this is my call to control all the things. All of them. Anything that's useful material to patrons in a record that is not actually transcribed off the item needs a controlled vocabulary. Or, other appropriately standardized expression. You can't do a controlled vocabulary for dates. You just have to be really clear about how they're written down. I can't with this. What even is this? And computers are even worse. Whatevs just type something is not okay in 2015. Transcribe it or control it. There is no third option. Fuck and a mess. And since I've used the word transcribe, let me just say this thing where we intentionally transcribe typos and other errors in records, in information that's material to a patron searching and browsing. Can we not, please? Can we not do that? Because computers won't know. Computers will happily operate on the wrong information, not knowing that it's wrong. So we got to stop propagating mistakes. Consider it a service to publishers, poor guys, as well as our poor patrons. I picked on the O20 field for another reason that has nothing really to do with cataloging practices and more to do with ISBNs. Now, I can fool my org of info students with this. I can't fool you. I want you to know I know this. I can't fool you with the question, is the ISBN a good book identifier? I mean, we all know it's not. We know that tons of books don't have ISBNs. We know that ISBNs accidentally and intentionally get reused. We know that it's not totally clear what a book even is in ISBN land. It's kind of an edition, but not really. It's kind of a format question, but not really. It's all very, very confusing. Perhaps predictably, it confuses computers too. Because computers are so literal-minded, they need to be really super unambiguous when talking about what kind of thing something is. They have to have a really super clear definition. This is a book. This is a print book. This is an ebook, whatever. If you and the computer have a different definition, different idea in your head about what a book is, well, the computer is going to do wild, random, unexpected, and unpredictable things from your point of view. And, the computer is happy to use whatever definition we come up with. It doesn't care. But in spite of Ferber, and sometimes it must be said because of it, we don't really have clear definitions here that we can operationalize in our systems that don't lead us into logical contradictions or really bad edge cases. And we kind of need that. So that's one thing. We got to figure out what exactly we're talking about when we say things like book and ebook and hardback and so on, so that we can explain the distinctions clearly to the computer. And if this reminds you of Suzanne Brie trying to explain when an antelope is a document and when it isn't, I'm right there with you. It's totally going to be weird and sometimes kind of theoretical like that. And I have to say, this mosaic is now kind of my personal headcanon for this is how Suzanne Brie looks to me now. Whatever works. And then, once we've figured out the kinds of things that we're talking about in our universe, we have to be able to point, and excuse me for being rude, but be able to point clearly and unambiguously at every single example of those things that we collectively, as a society, I will say, that we have, because that makes it easier to pool the information about these things that we collectively have, the network can work for us if we let it. But to let the network work, the network needs a common way to point at things and understand what's being pointed to. And for a computer, that means an identifier that, unlike an authority string, can never ever change. Computers get very confused by change, even more confused than the rest of us. And for a network computer, that means an identifier that's unique, not just in your organization, your library. So your call number, barcode number, that's not going to work. It's got to be unique worldwide. So that means another thing, it can't be language dependent. Because, we've tried already collating our records by fuzzy matching and trying to deduplicate. That's how metasearch worked. But we pretty much all know that metasearch never worked all that well. Computers are not bright enough to fuzzy match well all the time. And catalog data and typical metadata, they're sparse enough that they're not good candidates. There's not enough there for a computer to fuzzy match anyway. We're still going to have to use this just to get started because it's what we've got. We don't have anything better. But for some stuff, for some catalogs, the identifier thing is going to be a long haul. So that means we got to have unique identifiers for our stuff that are way more reliable than ISBNs. And if you know the linked data world at all, you already know that the scheme that's been settled on for these is URIs, which 99 times out of 100 look like URLs. And the reasoning there is we already know how to make URLs globally unique, because we already do that, or the web wouldn't work. That's all it is. It's just keeping the computers from getting confused. And so another problem we have to solve if we're going to take advantage of the network is taking identifiers and quasi-identifiers that we've been using for things like ISBNs, like authority strings, and matching them up with URIs, URLs that have been established for those things. Not going down in the weeds here, not even the seaweeds with the dolphins, but I do want you to know, if you don't already, that the nerd word for this process is reconciliation. Nice word. And it can be partially automated if you know your source data well, as catalogers tend to do. And the win here is that once you have a URI for something, you can go out to the network and ask a whole bunch of trustworthy sources, hey, what you know about this thing? And get back answers. To me, that's how what we now think of as copy cataloging is going to work. You ask tiny little questions of various reliable sources, get tiny little answers back, and you build them up into your search engines and your facets and your browsing tools and all the other user interface Chrome that we're already familiar with. It won't have to be done by hand. If you tell a computer every time I feed you a URI for a book we just bought, ask this question of that source in this way and store the answer there. And it will do that reliably and consistently every single time. And I strongly believe this will be a better solution to what I think of, capitalized, as the problem of vendor records. You're familiar with this problem. I don't have to elaborate. What I'm saying is the problem of vendor records is 9 times out of 10 a problem of vendors struggling not only with AACR2 and MARC, which are hard enough, but with MARC practices that are inconsistent across libraries to begin with. It'll be a lot easier for us and for vendors if instead our computers are asking their computers a lot of little tiny questions with little tiny answers. That leads me to one last thing about the O20, okay? ISBN's not unique. The field includes inconsistent format information. Yeah, we got that. Here's my question. What the ever-living heck is format information doing in an ISBN field to begin with? Much less information about volumes of a multi-volume series, and if it does have to be there, and I actually do know why it's there, can't it at least be in a separate subfield? What is this business with the parentheses? I'm showing you a mosaic detail here for a reason. You can see all the little tiny individual rock bits, and you can see how very carefully they're placed, and that none of them overlap anywhere. But that's what our catalog data and metadata need to look like. No overlaps, nothing just jammed together willy-nilly, everything in little tiny bits. and each tiny bit in its own singular place, very carefully set apart from the other tiny bits. It's called granularity, sometimes atomicity, if you're a relational database nerd, and computers love it. See, because this is the thing about computers. Computers are really, really good at building up whole mosaics from little tiny pieces. They're good at that. What they're critically bad at is taking a whole and breaking it down into parts. We have to do that for them. And as we saw with the O20 field, we often don't. Or when we do it in ways that the computer finds confusing or inconsistent. So I grabbed a couple of examples from IFLA's ISBD supplement. And again, if anybody here from IFLA, thank you for this. Classroom lifesaver. Just to show the difficulties, think like a computer for a second. There's a whole lot of punctuation all up in here. And it's not at all obvious even to me, and I'm a human being, what all of it means, what's being set off by it, or even if it means anything at all. I mean, look at the physical description of the globe there. Tell me what a period or a dot means there. One space, globe space, colon space, call dot, comma space, plastic space, semicolon space, 30 cm space, parenthesis, diam, dot, parenthesis. Oh, okay, as a human being, I can figure out that the dots there are calling out abbreviations, right? Because I'm a human being, I'm smart that way. Can I just tell the computer now to assume that a dot always means an abbreviation? Of course I can't, because that's not what it means in the other fields. And can anybody tell me why in the last area of the globe description, everything except the final sentence has a dot at the end? It's enough to make a programmer cry into her beer. Wisconsin, beer's a thing. I lopped the area labels off here for legibility, but I just want to point out we actually have two competing sets of delimiters happening here. The areas which are set off delimited by white space, and what's in each individual area, which is funky punctuation city. And when you add that to MARC, we got a whole nother set of delimiters in the form of fields, subfields, indicators. I respect my colleagues who teach cataloging. Wow, I could never do it. I cut my teeth on XML, where delimiters are totally cut and dried, and the validator will tell you if you screw them up. This mishmash is completely bewildering to me. Bottom example there, anybody see an error? I mean, I think there's an error. It's kind of hard to tell. But that very bottom line, if that's supposed to be an M dash before the word canyon, it actually isn't. Human being, no big deal. To a computer, very big deal. Just goes to show when we can't even be sure our documentation is right. So anybody who works with XML now is twitching because of the missing angle bracket. Sorry about that, but it illustrates an important point about delimiters. A lot of my students find learning markup, HTML, XML really frustrating because they've never had to be 100% consistent about delimiters before. So they make tiny little mistakes, like leaving off an angle bracket, and they haven't learned to look for those mistakes yet. They don't understand what the validator, which notices the mistakes, is trying to tell them. Is really frustrating for them. So what I tell them is, suck it up and deal. Okay, no, I'm not actually that evil about it. I'm pretty careful to point out the kinds of errors that beginners usually make. And I tell them that everybody makes those errors, even really skilled and experienced people. And it's okay. The whole point of validators is to help us get it right. But fundamentally, yeah, they got to learn to deal. And they don't like that, but too bad. Faciendum est. Must be done. Don't confuse the computer. Reliable and consistent delimiter use is how we avoid confusing the computer. Delimit in just one way, delimit clearly, delimit unambiguously. And you know, I have to share this thing that absolutely broke my heart. I was digging into the history of MARC and ISBD internationally. It was just a rabbit hole I fell down. And it turns out that a while back the Germans were totally bent on killing ISBD punctuation out of the MARC record, relying on MARC delimiters only, which from the point of view of 2015 totally would have been the right decision. But how could they know? English-speaking MARC went the ISBD direction instead, and 2020 hindsight, what can you do? So, what is it that we gotta do now? Quid faciendum est? We gotta get a handle on our free text issues. When we're saying the same thing more than once, we need to say it the same way every time. We need to atomize our data, make it as granular as it can possibly be. The delimiter thing, sometimes we have too many, and sometimes we don't have enough, and it would be nice to find a happy medium there. And when we can identify something as well as labeling it for our patrons, we should, because identifiers are labels for computers. Identifiers make networked computers happy and useful. And just to reiterate, we don't have to do these things because linked data. We have to do these things because relational databases, because search engines, because faceted browsing, because internet, because web, basically because not too bright computers. Now, no secret, cards on the table here. If we do these things, we'll be a whole lot closer to linked data. So it's not like I'm ignoring that, not at all. I'm just saying linked data is not all that this is about. So that's great. Those of you in this room who are a bit younger, you got jobs for life here. I tell my students, this is your career, this migration, this transition is what you will be spending your career on. Plenty of work. So, how do we actually do it exactly? Good question to have an answer to. By hand, one record at a time, not the answer. It can't be. We got too many records. I mean, yeah, there's still going to be weird outliers that we end up fixing by hand. There always are. Oh boy, I could tell you stories. I'm sure you could tell me stories too. But we need to throw computers at fixing the easier problems and limit the handwork to those weird outliers. We just got too much data to do it any other way. And because we live with networked computers, I'm not totally sure that doing it one organization at a time is quite the way either, because in my head, and I lived this with institutional repositories, it kind of means that we're all solving the same problems redundantly in parallel, and we don't need to do that necessarily. It costs too much, and it's going to take too long. But the truth is, we collectively don't yet have the know-how that we need to collaborate on this. Most computer programmers don't have the depth of MARC and AACR2 knowledge that they need to fix these problems. And most catalogers, I won't say most, but many catalogers don't yet know how to work with a great mass of records as opposed to editing one record at a time. So this particular problem, this collaboration problem, solvitur discendo, it is solved by learning. Catalogers, developers, we all got some learning to do, and I mean, I would say that, right? I'm a teacher. But I am a teacher because I believe this. It is solved by learning. Managers in the room, supervisors, please give your people time and space to learn. Do not make me yell at you about this, because I will. Straight up, your cataloging backlog or that new tech thing that your developers are currently working on is far less important than your strategic preparation for what's coming down the pipeline at you. By all means, hold your people accountable for actually learning. I'm in favor of that. Some people will say they want to learn and then complain endlessly about it. I could tell you stories, you can probably tell me stories too. Hold them accountable, but let them learn. Help them learn. Learn yourself. Won't kill you. Might make you stronger. Here are some tools that I think are well worth adding to your toolkit if they're not there already, because they're designed to fix stuff in lots of records at once, rather than, or possibly in addition to, one record at a time. I've ordered them by the order in which I would recommend that a cataloger learn them. And the last half you may not even need. I mentioned these because there are situations where they're genuinely going to be useful. Start with MARC Edit, it's the workhorse. It's got an increasing number of really good batch record editing tools. I don't know that I need to say anything about that. Most of you in this room probably already at least have heard of this tool. Next tool I recommend is OpenRefine. You may see it called Google Refine as well. There's a variant on OpenRefine that's specifically designed for getting to and from linked data. It's called LOD-Refine for Linked Open Data Refine. You have to install it anyway, so you might as well install the one that's ready for linked data anyway. Regular expressions are kind of the first nerdy thing I ever learned, so I'm kind of over fond of them. Regular expressions are search and replace tools that do pattern matching in very, very nifty and sophisticated ways. So if you're interested in learning regular expressions, I found this wonderful site, and I actually have my students using it now. It makes me very happy. regex1.com, series of very, very nicely presented tutorials getting you used to regular expressions. Strongly, strongly recommended. So last three. If you have to extract data from a relational database or put data back into a relational database, structured query language, SQL, is the language that you learn to do that with. We teach a lot of it in a semester. It's not, as you know, if you can handle MARC and AACR2, you can totally handle SQL. If you have a lot of XML around, there is a little language, if you will, that's designed to take XML and turn it into other stuff, including linked data, if that's your thing. It's called XSLT. The learning curve there is steep. I recommend looking at other people's code to get started. But I actually love XSLT. I'm weird that way. Last thing, this is relatively new and changing, and I really don't recommend starting here because here there be yaks. And if you've heard the phrase yak shaving from your developers, yak shaving is all the really annoying work you have to do before you can actually do the work that solves your problem. Right, so installing Kathmandu and Fix, there's a lot of yak shaving there, I will warn you. But Kathmandu and Fix come out of France. Fix is a little language aimed at batch editing metadata. Really, really interesting little project. I think it will get easier to use. And therefore, I think it's worth keeping an eye on, even if you don't dive into it right this second. So how should you learn and what should you do with what you learn? In my head, those questions are intimately entwined. In some circles, I'm known for the phrase beating things with rocks until they work. And if you use rocks from mosaics, this probably won't work. They're too small, but you get the idea. I think plain old mucking around and breaking things and fixing them once you break them is the best way to learn new tools. It's certainly how I do it, and it's certainly how I kind of dump my students in the deep end and have them do it. Pick something to do with the tool, then do it. And if a few rocks get beaten on along the way, it's all good. What should you pick to do with the tools exactly? Well, try cleaning up your catalog data, right? Go fix your O20s with MARCEdit. See if you can at least make those format notes a little more consistent. Export your data into something OpenRefine can read. It's doable. I know catalogers who have done it. See if you can cluster your 504s such that you can start to try to answer the question, which books have bibliographies, which books have indexes. Try fixing your dates. Have fun with that. All kinds of fun and interesting problems you'll run into with dates and have to come up with a way to solve. But boy, will you learn the tool that way. You know your catalogs a lot better than I do. Right? You know where the worst problems are. You know the bits of data you had that you wish the computers understood so that they could answer patron questions better. So you know where the most important problems to fix are, and that's crucial knowledge. So learn the tools by fixing the problems that you already know are there. So experts to watch. Nari spectandi. Christina Harlow doing fabulous work, amazing work. Just published an article on Kathmandu and Fix in the Code for Live journal. I don't recommend that you dive into that right away, but if you want to see what real people are doing, Christina is one to watch. Karen Coyle, of course. Diane Hillman, of course. Owen Stevens, Owen's a Brit, doing very interesting things, just playing around with linked data to see what he can do. He's got a nice blog at ostevens.com. I rip him off constantly for stuff for my linked data class. And of course, OCLC Research, because they're doing this at scale. They have to. And learning very interesting things thereby. Person I would particularly watch is Tom Hickey, who has a blog. I meant to look it up and then I didn't, but yes, you can find him online. So we got a lot of work to do, and we know it's got to be done. So let's jump in there and do it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions if you have them.
Thank you so much, Dorothea.
Oh, you're welcome.
We do have
We have time for
microphones,
questions.
and we would ask that you raise your hand if you have a question, and so that other people can hear your question.
Mark, there's one way in the back there.
I'm Frank Newton.
Hi, Frank.
I wanted to ask you whether computers can entertain hypotheses, and the reason I'm asking is because it seems to me that that's what human beings do with punctuation.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of punctuation, and I think the reason that MARC records have a lot of punctuation in them is because citation standards like MLA and APA have a lot of punctuation in them. And I think that catalog cards began as an elaboration of a citation format.
I agree.
And I don't mean to say that while people were developing card catalogs and what information and how they would format it on card catalogs, they were constantly saying, we want to make this like citation formats. I just think that that was constantly in the back of their minds and
Yep.
not necessarily articulated a lot. So lots of punctuation, but by and large, mostly it seems to me periods do not have an infinite number of meanings. They have certain meanings that have high probabilities, and one of them is the one you mentioned about abbreviations. So suppose you have a globe and you have metadata for a globe, and in parentheses you have DIAM period. Then what I would like the computer to do is to entertain the hypothesis that that period is there because there's a longer word that begins with DIAM that has to do with globes. And that's the way I believe a human being would operate.
Yep.
And we go to our mental dictionaries and we find the word diameter. And I don't know exactly how we do that, but I don't completely feel that that's beyond the realm of programming to figure out how we connect DIAM with the word diameter. So that's another, in addition to saying that I like punctuation, I also wanted to say that I think that sometimes we assume that things are unprogrammable when in fact they're perfectly, they're really not that hard to program. And I wish, I'm not a programmer at all, but I wish that somebody would program computers to use the singular and plural form of nouns accurately. So I don't like it when a computer says to me, 1 books, because I know that after 1, you're supposed to leave off the S at the end of books. And I don't see why the computers couldn't be programmed to understand that too. And
The question is, how much money and programmer time are you going to spend asking a computer to act like a human being when computers can't really do that? And we have thrown an awful lot of money, an awful lot of time at a lot of vendors and a lot of developers, asking them to do this impossible thing because no, computers don't get hypotheses. It's yes or no, right? That's what they get. And so what you end up doing, and the singular plural problem is relatively easy to solve. That's an easy one. Anybody know about Inera? I can't remember where they're based now. They're a service software company for publishers, and the reason they exist and the reason they make their money, and they're a very profitable corporation, is that they have written immense amounts of computer code just to parse citations, right? That's a multi-million-dollar industry because computers are so bad at it, right? So yeah, we can solve these problems. Don't we have better problems to solve, I guess, is where I'm at on that. More questions?
My name is Christine Delaney from American University
Hi,
Library.
Christine.
Hi. And my question has to do with authority work.
Yeah.
I've heard or received some mixed information about whether or not in a linked data world, authority work will be necessary to perform. We won't need authority records, et cetera. Can you say a few words about your thoughts about authority work and authority records in a linked data world?
I think there's going to be gigantically more of it. When I say control all the things, that to me means we have authorities and more of them. We have more controlled vocabularies. So authority work in the linked data world is going to be focused a little less on figuring out the labels and more on, okay, we've slapped an identifier on this person who just wrote a book for the first time, or on this place that just became a place. And the authority work becomes, what else do we know that we can attach to this identifier? We know the name for the place, we know the time it was established, we know where else it is in the universe, things like that. So authority work will change a little bit, the emphasis is gonna change, but yeah, we still gotta do it. The fun thing is, though, that we don't have to do it individually and in parallel, because that's what the network buys us. As soon as one person knows something interesting about a person represented by a URL, they tell the world, and now nobody else has to gather that piece of information because it's out there and we can ask for it. So yes, definitely still authority work, but it'll be networked authority work.
So I had a question about batch editing and subject headings.
Yeah.
Cause
Scary stuff sometimes.
Because a lot, I mean, you were talking about how other data is inconsistent, but as a cataloger, I've actually found that subject headings are the most inconsistent because there are so many terms that can be used for like one piece of information, and there's only so many that can be put in a record without overwhelming a record.
Right.
So I was wondering if there's a bunch of similar records, if an institution can sort of like batch edit those.
I hope so, because we're gonna have to do that a lot. Well, not a lot. I don't actually know how much. Let me be clear about this. A lot of this problem arises because subject terminology does change over time, and sometimes we have time to fix it in our records, and sometimes we kind of don't. So that's just, acute time poverty is one reason that subject headings get into such a state. So there are some interesting things that can happen with subject headings in a linked data world. And let me see how I want to frame this. One of them is that I think I think there are better ways to handle pre-coordination and presenting pre-coordination to patrons than we currently have. So I think that actually, once we do the work, will be a big benefit. Some of it is actually using a subject heading to follow our nose, and not just through library collections, but through digital catalog or digital collections, through archives, that don't even necessarily need to be using the same subject vocabularies that we use in libraries. That's okay, because vocabulary developers, right, controllers, if you will, are working very hard behind the scenes to draw equivalences across vocabularies. And in a linked data world, that can actually become very seamless. So the most interesting linked data projects to me, and the ones that I like to show to my students, are the ones that do the best work, not just updating subject headings, not just making them internally consistent. That's going to be a Sisyphean effort. But leading people to the richness of all of the stuff that we have collectively as a society, all the information that we have on topics of interest, people of interest, things like that. That was a very rambling answer, and I don't know if I answered your question, but I try.
I have two more over here.
Okay.
I'm Ian Fairclough, currently at George Mason University,
Hi.
cataloging librarian. I think that administrators need to hear what you said today much more than we do, because they're the ones who basically tell us what to do. And when they're counting
Right.
how much work we did, they don't say how many errors did you fix today, and they want to know how many materials have been processed.
Hear, hear.
And in some cases, I've read that people have been specifically forbidden to make corrections that they see of needed work in.
I have heard this too. It makes me so sad and so angry, because it's just making the work down the line even worse, even harder.
Even in members of the OCLC cooperative, where bibliographic records are not your records, but our records.
Oh, don't get me started. I actually called out OCLC on that one in person once.
Thank you
It
for
was
doing
an
that.
interesting conversation.
And you may be familiar with the Typo of the Day project, which began 10 years ago based on Terry Ballard's database of records. That project is sort of, as I envisaged, fizzled to a stop, but needs to be revived, perhaps not fixing individual words, but fixing entire strings. That could be done mechanically. It's real
Some of it,
dangerous
yeah.
to go in and try and fix mechanically individual mistakes, but if you have...
If you have a good testing tool, if you can see what's going to happen before it happens, that's a great thing.
and having fixed numerous cases of misspelled university, and then gone back years later and
Yep.
found that 30 of them have crept in because vendor records contain them. Vendors are the ones who need to be attending to this. They
Hear, hear.
are on a cash basis. They have no motivation to do anything other than promulgate
The
their
least
wares.
possible, yeah.
These are comments that I've made, and I think a lot of people who are involved in various projects have retired. New people coming in need to be trained in the fact that these are the kinds of activities we need to be engaged in.
Hear, hear. And I'm doing my best at the library school where I'm at. But yes, 100% behind you. Hi. Yeah.
I'm Virginia Williams from Frostburg State University.
Hi, Virginia.
Hi. I like to think that when we're making changes like this, that we think, for example, not going where Google is, but where Google's going. Are you aware of any of the things that are just on the horizon now that we need to be aware of when we do these changes?
Yeah. That's a great question, by the way, and thank you for asking it. The next time you redesign your website, right, when you're redoing all of your templates, the next time you redesign your digital collections, or even the next time you theme your catalogs, look at something called schema.org microdata, and you can learn about this at schema.org, perhaps unsurprisingly. So the bit of history that I didn't get into here is that the the web's first fling with what's now linked data, the semantic web, was a complete flop, right? It didn't happen. And it didn't happen because RDF is a beast, right? It's really hard to learn past a certain relatively simple point. It's hard to implement, and web developers took one look and ran screaming in the opposite direction. I can't blame them. I don't like RDF either. So this time around, the major search engines, Google, Bing, Yahoo, a couple others, I don't think DuckDuckGo is involved, though I think they should be. If anybody here is in this room from DuckDuckGo, please do that. So they got together and said, okay, we need to break this down and make it simpler. And so they came up with a thing called microdata that you can implement directly in HTML, and it's got some very specific vocabularies that you can use to describe things like libraries, the holy trinity of library information, right? Address, hours, events. You can put that in microdata, and then the search engine can pick it up and show it directly in the search result. If you do a Google search on almost any current movie, you will see much richer information than you used to, because IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, has implemented microdata very effectively, and Google picks up on that. In the Code for LiveJournal, a couple other places, there are examples of libraries improving their search results and actually moving their search results up on search results pages because of microdata. So the one thing, if you had to pin me down to one thing that's on the horizon that I think is worth looking at, I would say microdata. Check it out. Next time you're doing a redesign, see what you can implement.
I think we have time for just one more quick question right here.
Hi, I'm Carrie Brady. I'm from Maryland's Department of Legislative Services.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. And I have a question about making more consistent records that describe items that are inconsistent. We
Yeah.
most of our
Wonderful edge
cataloging,
cases.
yeah, most of our cataloging is government agency reports and task force reports and all that
Yeah.
fun stuff. And many of them are annual or, at least serialized in some way. And
Oh, cereals.
yeah. Unfortunately, because they're not, published by a publisher who wants to be wants to be found again, and so has some stake in being consistent.
Yeah.
They are quite often, they change titles very frequently, which isn't as big a deal because you've got all those 246s.
Right.
But they change formats frequently. They change, even the laws that require the reports change frequently. And sometimes those get to be a real mess as far as tracking those in the record. But then the biggest problem comes in when they've done something strange about, oh, well, they skipped a year here, but they made it up in this other one. And so the dates are all messed up. And then patrons are going to be looking for them, but they don't know that they actually split this report up into this report and then also this other report that's shelved over here. And so with some of these records, we end up with a zillion 500 notes.
Right.
And of course they're free
because
text.
Mark doesn't give you any other way to represent that.
Exactly.
Right?
And sometimes it's so complicated that it has to be free text because there's really no
How in the world else do you
standardized-
tell even a human being what in the world is going on here? Yeah.
Yeah.
So explaining things to human beings we shall always have with us. Here's what I'll say about that. Linked data, because it is intrinsically granular, right? You've probably all heard the idea that we're exploding the record and we're making statements. Part of the reason we're doing that is that the record is kind of a, since I'm on my Greek Latin kick today, a Procrustean bed. We lop off anything that we have to lop off to make whatever we're describing fit the record. I think linked data will let us stop doing that. And I think particularly for when you have these strange edge cases and for formats that Mark has never dealt real well with, there's a great Code for LiveJournal article from a computer programmer trying to get to grips with how Mark handles music scores. Right. Exactly. I think we will expand into a world that's much kinder to things that don't quite fit the catalog card model that was designed for books. That's my hope anyway. That's my hope.
Thanks.
Sure. Well, thank you all. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
So I think our presentation today is going to complement Dorothea's actually nicely. We are going to try to help you prepare to be linked. I'm going to give kind of a high-level talk, and then Jackie will get more down in the dirt and give the real meat of some things you can do. Okay, so how many of you have been to Link Data Talks before? How familiar is this slide? I hate Legos. I'm getting this out of the way now. This is the obligatory Lego slide. We're done, it's over. No more, okay? I was just talking to somebody about stepping on them and how painful that can be. There are many reasons not to like Legos. So back when I was a library school student at the University of Maryland, Dale Flecker from Harvard came to speak to us about the future of libraries and technology. And the presentation that he gave was full of such doom and gloom that I walked away thinking, why am I even bothering to get this degree? And basically what he painted this really dire picture of the inability of libraries to ever catch up with technology because we are so bogged down by our processes. We're not agile enough to make any progress. So what I'd like to say to you is, yes, I'm on the linked data bandwagon because linked data gives me hope. It gives me hope that we can significantly, or at least a lot, decrease that technology gap. I think we're at a crossroads. I think behind us is the comfort of what we know, a technology that we've been using for 65 years that we feel warm and fuzzy about. And on the other side is an opportunity to progress to more current technology, along with all the anxiety and discomfort that comes with change and unfamiliar territory. But if we can embrace this change now and adopt agile practices, then perhaps we can actually gain ground on technology. And maybe moving forward, we can catch up and maybe even keep up. So Mark is behind me at the crossroad, or behind us at the crossroad, at our backs, and linked data is in front of us. At a high level, a change to linked data is a change from operating in siloed databases to working with technology that's aligned with the semantic web. It'll force us to be more aware of how the resources we're working with are related and how our data works on the web. All right, so I mentioned semantic web. I really hope, one of my dreams is that I will never have to explain this again. I really hope that this slide can be thrown away within the next year. So what is the semantic web? The semantic web is simply a web of data. It's a more granular web than the one we're used to. The web we're used to links documents to documents. The semantic web links data to data. The language of the semantic web is Resource Description Framework, or RDF, and RDF is expressed in triples. Triples look like simple sentences: subject, predicate, object. The idea behind triples is that they should be expressed, or that the data, the pieces of the triples, the subject, the predicate, and the object, are preferably expressed as IRIs. And this is a different acronym than the one that Dorothea used. She talked about URIs. Jackie and I are going to say IRI instead. So what is an IRI? An IRI is an internationalized resource identifier. It's a URI that's basically internationalized. So what does that mean? URI uses a limited character set. IRI uses a universal character set to allow expression in non-Latin scripts. So the idea is that IRIs can then be round-tripped back to URIs and then to other languages. So it's an internationalization of a URI. So if I am Chinese, I can see a URI in Chinese and understand what it's saying. I can say it in my own language. We may go back and forth a little bit, Jackie and I, between IRI and URI, but I think mostly you'll be hearing us say IRI, so we just wanted to make that explanation. And Jackie will be going into this in detail when she talks to you later. One of the really important things to keep in mind when you're talking about linked data and the semantic web, and you're talking about RDF, and this is a concept that I think sometimes people or catalogers may have difficulty grasping, because we think in terms of records. No more records. We're talking in RDF about pieces of data. So you don't have a record to give each piece of data context. Each triple has to be understandable on its own out in the world. It has to be able to sit out in the world and make sense. No record to give it context. The context of the object of the triple is its subject. Okay? Important concept, really important concept to digest and understand. So, first I'll start by, we'll talk about how we can prepare ourselves for linked data. And I am right up there with Dorothea, learn, 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 learn. So one of the things that we can do in advance of this becoming a standard for us to use, because it's not a standard. It's not an adopted standard for us to be using right now, right? So we're preparing. We're preparing so that when we cross that road, there's not so anxiety-filled. We can mitigate some of the anxiety that companies change with learning. And when I'm talking about learning, I'm saying explore, buy a book, do it on your own. Look through the web. There are places with W3C where you can read about linked data. There's information about linked data all over the place. You can take formal linked data training. There is that available. If you're an administrator, what I would say to you is have discussion groups. Invite your staff to sit down maybe have a regular brown bag lunch where they can talk about their thoughts, their concerns, and learn from each other, from each other's learning. Make it an open discussion. And then if your staff or your library can do it, get involved in experimentation of some kind. It doesn't hurt to be playing with things. You can't break anything because none of it is real right now. It's just play. It's all just play right now. One of the things that we need to do is adjust the way we think, right? So as I said, we need to think in terms of data rather than records. So for example, MARC allows us to say that a bib record was created by one entity and then edited or modified by other entities. I hate the 041. But at a data level, we can't identify. When you look at a MARC record, you have absolutely no idea what piece of data LC created, NLM modified, and George Washington University completely replaced. You don't know. All you know is that those institutions touched that record and that you think those institutions do good cataloging work. So do we really need to know? Do we really need to know exactly what piece of data any particular institution contributes to a MARC record? We don't know it now. Why would we insist on knowing that in a linked data environment? Every time we use a triple, every time we go out on the web and pull something in, as Dorothea's illustration of copy cataloging and going out and pulling in different pieces, every time we pull a piece of data in, we are asserting that that piece of data is an authoritative piece of data, that we believe that that piece of data is true and accurate. So does it matter where it comes from? Does it matter who originally created it? if it is true and accurate, because that's really what we're shooting for in the end, is accuracy. So there's conversion programs out there right now, a couple, conversion of legacy MARC to linked data. That conversion will be lossy. Get used to it, deal with it, move on. We are not having MARC in RDF. There's MARC data that just doesn't necessarily make sense. What we need to do when we're looking at this conversion of legacy MARC is to think about, what do we need? What can we afford to lose? There's a lot of redundant data in MARC, right? What can we afford to lose, and what do we really need to keep? And who are we keeping it for? If we've been recording some piece of data for 65 years because someday someone may want to use it, and no one has, or it's been used twice, I say, throw it away. I clean out my closet at the end of every season. If I have not worn something that season, it goes to Goodwill. We need to start thinking in those terms. I know it's a little harsh, but it keeps my closet reasonable. So some of the best training, most that I've ever had was Agile development training. The idea is that you assess the requirements, you develop a solution, and then you reassess, decide if the solution still works, and you may revise the solution. And then you go back and you reassess, revise the solution. It's an iterative process. And one of the things that we need to think about, if we're going to keep up with technology and we're going to keep moving along, if we take this linked data path and we're going to keep going forward and we're not going to be left behind the way we've been left behind with MARC, we are never done. The process is never, there is no such thing as finished. It is, you're always iterating. You have to get used to that. You have to start thinking that the data may still all be there, might be called something, might be tagged a little differently, it might show up a little differently, dates may be formatted differently because 5 years from now we find out there's a better way to format dates than anybody has been doing before. It's okay. Change is good. Change is okay as long as we keep moving forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing data, and I think I can cut some of this out because I think Dorothea covered this really well. So what can we do? What can we do to prepare for linked data? We have data model development going on. So what does that mean? We had a question, I'm sorry, I couldn't see who asked the question about serials. So, okay, so in an environment where you're looking at every piece of data and how every piece of data relates to another piece of data, we have to think about how do we model that data so that it describes, when you group it or when you pull pieces of it together, it describes what you need it to describe in a good way, in the way that you want it done, right? So you have a title. Serial has title. Serial has title. You have serial has publisher. You have serial changed frequency. Uh-oh, what do we do now, right? Maybe what we do is we model a data event. And we say, serial had event, change frequency. And then we move from there. We have to think about how we can say these things in linked data, the things that we need to say. How do we say them so that they make sense and that the stupid computers and the stupid programs that we use can put it all together and have it make sense to someone else looking at it? And work like this is going on. NLM has been working with George Washington University, University of California, Davis, and Zafira to model a bib frame ontology, a bib frame or linked data model for monographs. We started with low-hanging fruit, and we actually published that back in December. Zafira is putting together, if you are an alumni of Zafira training, they have alumni task groups that they're putting together now to work on data modeling for specific types of resources. And anyone can join those. If you have to have gone through training, but you can join those, and you could also follow them. Even if you can't join, you can follow. There's a concert group that's been put together also to talk about modeling for serials. So there are things out there. And then, of course, there are the LD4 projects, LD4L and LD4P, where they're also looking at, part of those projects is looking at how they model data for certain resources. So if you can't do these things, or be part of these particular things, you can at least follow them. And you can, locally in your own institutions, start to think about how would I model, and serials are a great one, how would I model a serial? How would I make this work? And then you can contribute what you know to lists, you contribute it to groups, contribute to however you can. We already have a bunch of RDF ontologies or schema. There are a lot out there. And we need to start thinking about which ones do we want to use, or which pieces of ones do we want to use. For example, there's one called Provo that has really nice modeling for provenance information. Maybe we want to use BibFrame and then also use some Provo predicates when we're describing something. So we need to start thinking about that as internally. What are we doing within our library? But then we also need to think about are we going to have preferred ontologies or preferred schema for certain kinds of information, certain kinds of data across libraries, so that we can make sure that we're all talking the same language or speaking the same language, that we can all link together. Whose data do you want to use? Whose authoritative data do you want to use? I have a colleague at UC Davis who, her dream is to have an ISSN, plug it into a form, have that form send it out to the ISBN portal, pick up linked data from the ISB portal, and populate her form. It's a great dream, but she needs to talk to the people at the ISS or the ISSN portal. So she needs to talk to people at the ISSN portal if she wants to make it happen, because they have to know that she's interested. So at NLM, we just finished, or we haven't finished, but we are closing a beta project where we publish Mesh in RDF. The way that came about was as part of the BibFrame early experimenters, Eric Miller of Zafira, the first time I met him, sat me down and said, I need to talk to you. And we sat over dinner, and all he kept telling me were use cases that he knew of where people wanted to use Mesh in RDF. And that was the impetus. That was what got that project started. So you have to tell people that you want to use their data. They have to know that there's a need for their data in RDF to give them the impetus to change it over so that you can use it. And we need to expose our authorities. And I think Dorothea covered this really well. If you've got a name authority or you've got something, a local name authority, your professors, your faculty, get those names into the shared authority files. Get those names into VIAF or ORCID or ISNI or whatever, so that your faculty can get out there, so that people can find your faculty, you can link to your faculty, people can link to your faculty. Share that stuff so that those names are out there and they can be used by others. Oops. So when we're recording data, and again, Dorothea hit on this, we need to think about best practices. There's a PCC, and Jackie's going to talk about this a little bit because she leads the group, but there's a PCC task group on URIs that really kind of got started when Steve Folsom from Cornell University shared a white paper that he had written with some friends about the many ways that identifiers are recorded in MARC and the need for a consistent way to record identifiers in MARC so that we could convert them into actionable IRIs, actionable HTTP IRIs. You could do that. If you see a need, what he did was he wrote that paper, somebody said to him, you know what, you should bring that to MAC at ALA. And he brought it to MAC, and the folks at MAC said, you know, you really need to bring that to the PCC. So he brought it to the PCC, and now there's a PCC task group looking into best practices for the creation of IRIs or URIs. If you see a need, get the ball rolling. Say it. Collaborate. Let people speak. Tell people. I think that if we do this, or this doesn't look to me like it's going to work because it's a string, not an identifier, or there are so many different ways to format this identifier. How can we make this better? If you see that need, participate. And I am so in agreement, we need to de-emphasize transcription. I mean, some things you can't help, you got to describe. A title, you got to transcribe, right? It's a title, you know. But Roman numerals, really? Really? It drives me absolutely insane. I don't think people even know what they mean half the time. Forget computers, right? It's just, really, let's drop the Roman numerals. I mean, and there are other things like that, right? There are other things like that. If you really look at the MARC data, really take a look and see, do I need to transcribe this, or can I do this a different way? Another thing that we can look at now that we can start seeing is looking at the linked data pilots and some of the tools. So Library of Congress has got a whole bunch of tools, right, that they're putting out and making available for you to use and play with and experiment with. Zafira has some tools. UC Davis is working on making available a cataloging module that will have a data entry user interface, and you can then see what your data looks like as linked data. There's also RIMF that Deborah Fritz has put out. So there are things out there that you can play with. Play with these things. Take a look. See what it looks like. And then you can make suggestions. You can say, you know, I would really like this better if it did this. Or this would work better for me if it did that, right? So Zafira's, one of the things in Zafira's tool is that you can actually go out and if you're looking for an authority or a name authority, you can say, I want to see the LC NAF, the LC name authority, and it'll open a little box and it will show you what the data is. Right now, it's only machine readable. So one of the things you can tell Zafira is, hey, you know what? I need this to be human readable because this makes no sense to me right now. Doesn't help me distinguish it from anything else. You can play with these things, you can make comment, you can help affect how they are developed. So we can also prepare for discovery. And you'll like this one, Dorothea. This is from the Très Richer, the Duc de Berry, 15th century Book of Hours. We need to seed the semantic web. We need to seed it with authoritative data. Our standard vocabularies, subjects, mesh, LC, LCSH, some of this work is already being done, right? National Agricultural Library has done this with, and if there's anyone here, forgive me if is it Agricola? You know, name authorities, all of these things, these are all seeds. These are all things that we get these standard vocabularies out there, identified in a standard way, and then we can link to them. But if we have nothing to link to, if I'm an NLM and I'm cataloging, I'm trying to cataloging a book and link data, and we only use mesh subject headings, and mesh is not available in RDF, I'm stuck, right? How is anybody on the web going to find those subject headings if in a linked data environment? And we need to think, this is, I lie awake at night and think about these things, but with the prospect of, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of libraries, I don't even know how many libraries there are across the world, right? Exposing their collections as linked data on the web, I think there's going to be an information explosion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some way to manage this that I don't understand. But how will libraries manage that, right? So we want our local constituents to be able to find our resources easily, but not all our users are local. And we want our collections to be discoverable across the world. So everybody has a copy, not everybody, but most people probably have a copy of Gray's Anatomy, right? That's not one of those things that is unique to any one library. But Marshall Nierenberg's Nobel Prize is unique to the NLM. We want people to know that that's there, to be able to find it, maybe to be able to see it if we've got a photo of it, or his collections, to be able to find those. Those are the things we really want to stress, right? So those are the things that I think we need to think about first. Sure, it's easy to model books, it's low-hanging fruit. Serials need to be done too, but you know what? Really, everybody's got a copy of JAMA somewhere, right? Everybody's got a copy of Nature somewhere. Not everybody has a copy of Marshall Nierenberg's papers. When Deanna, so one of the things that I think we need to think about is, can we work with the search engine providers? Can we work with them to help get expose our library data in a way that's manageable, that doesn't explode people's brains? When I worked, I was a consultant to the working group on the future of bibliographic control, which Deanna Markham pulled together. And one of the things she did was to invite Google and Microsoft to the table. And they agreed to join. They were at every meeting. They were at every public presentation that went on, and behind the scenes, they worked with us. Maybe it's time for us to reopen that door. Maybe we need to talk to them and say, these are our concerns. Maybe you have a way to manage this. Maybe we can figure out together a way to manage this. Maybe you don't care. Maybe we can work with them. So this is a knowledge graph. So Dorothea talked before about using schema markup, microdata markup. This is a knowledge graph from Google, which if you look at Marie Curie, this is that thing that shows up on the right side of the screen and gives you some information. And this is all linked data. This is all coming from schema. Libraries aren't here anywhere. You've got quotes, right? You've got a little bit of biographical information, quotes, and then you've got people also search for. What if it also included resources in libraries and museums? What if there was a way to say, there's so many millions of pieces of data coming in from libraries, what if we group it? Whoops. And even better, what if we can group it, because we have such great data, and say, I want literature. We can show you literature by Marie Curie. We can show you literature about her. We can show you her letters. We can show you her manuscript and archive collections. We can show you images, and we can show you film. What if we can even give them some facets, because we do have such great data? Something to think about. So, at the heart of all the stuff that I've been talking about is the ability to link our data. And ultimately, that can't happen if we don't use IRIs instead of strings wherever we can. So I'm going to turn this over to Jackie now, who is the IRI guru, and she will talk to you about her experiences with IRIs.
So the secret is the identifier, and so with this, the secret is out. So my portion, hopefully, will not disappoint you, is how GW attempted to bring that down to our routine, our daily operation level. As you know, my long journey with electronic resources, I was at UVA playing with TI header, and then through University of Michigan, I was working with Google Books, working through finding things that are in copyright and now our print. And now I'm in GW working with a group of staff to figure out how we could expose our data. So Nancy alluded to earlier the IRI, and this is what my focus is gonna be, is making sure that we are looking at a script that is usable across different domains. and it's acceptable globally. With that in mind, I think everyone probably by now had an idea, the triples. And the second I that Nancy alluded to, and is the focus of what an RDF statement is this identifier that is unique, and it is universal. Now, the thing is with this IRI, it has to be that it can provide linking access through a variety of networks globally. So this is essentially is if you were to work with an RDF statement, you can see that an identifier is the pivotal element of this identification process. So why do we put so much emphasis of understanding an identifier? And from this point forward, I'm gonna just use the word IRI. It facilitates data exposure. It helps transmit and exchange our data via the networks. Now, when it is persistent, unambiguous, and uniform in syntax, and it is consistent over time, it is of high value because it will allow the computer to not only understand the content, but also derive new knowledge by reasoning about that content, and that is the key. In an RDF environment, with the presence of URI, it shows how it allows the machine to not only understand what is being connected, but also have the ability to reason and derive new knowledge from it. And then that is how the web of data gets created. And then IRI is undeniable, the hallmark of the whole process, the link, open data. GW have been fortunate to have been able to participate in the process of different initiatives as an early experimenter and a testbed implementer. And experience with National Library of Medicine as they began to contemplate the approach, the modular approach. We were fortunate enough to be at the table and observe and participate. So how do we get to where we are right now is simply because through the grueling process of the 2 years that we participated in this BRIFM initiative, we went through numerous of webinars, study halls, exercises, pair studies. It made us realize that we need to begin to have a vision within us. What do I want to do for my profession to move forward, to be counted in this web-aligned service? How are we going to learn to be able to make use of the skills, the knowledge that we already have and contribute to the wider world of the knowledge information sphere? So throughout this process, we begin to have a vision how we could move together as a team. We learn how to facilitate data query through the process that open source software made available to us. And by hearing from Dorothea's sharing the skill set, I must say I was really comforted to know 3 years ago, I couldn't have said this in front of all of you. But right now, my team, the only skills that we are in need of, is come and do. We have every single one that Dorothea mentioned on her slide. It took 3 years. Took 3 years constantly learning and throughout the process. So, it is not difficult for all of us here to set aside time and communicate to your manager, your supervisor, and say, I have a vision. I'd like to do this. Do I have the time? Can you give me the time? How I can adjust my workload in order to accomplish that? Because this is ultimately, it's a great contribution to the profession. So in that, we began to consider how then we could continue our experimentation. How can we use this in the MARC environment? How is it that the RDF linking concept can be extended in our current ILS system? So here are some of the questions that before we started, we had to find some way to attempt to answer. Your IRI in MARC, when we encode data in MARC, you have to decide the field where it goes. And then you have to know, is there a subfield for it? And so how does this relate to the process that we already learned when we were experimenting BibFrame? And in order to accomplish that, what type of workflow or changes must take place so that we could accomplish this little tiny bit of the process? And so we began investigating and doing research. So the first thing we found on the MARC standard side was this is instruction. There is ability for us to play with the data. And in our case, we didn't really quite understand when we first began in 2013, September. We didn't quite understand how we can construct this using the form that we're most interested in. And we did not know what kind of impact that the data would do to our Voyager system. So our focus is on non-literal surrogate value, which is the HTTP URI, not the text string, because over the years, we've been playing with data. We have been shifting our mindset from putting string, thinking the string in terms of string is data. So then what else? Because we are also an OCLC library, in addition, we need to know what that means in an OCLC environment. And unfortunately, we can't do anything in OCLC. This is the guidelines. Basically said we cannot do anything with Sapphire Zero. So that essentially opened up the door for us to experiment locally in our local Voyager system. So before that, we also began to see if we could locate other type of usage in Sapphire Zero that already in connection. And most of them we found are these formats that are very much like the 035 that everyone is aware of. So you will put an organization code within parens, followed by an alphanumeric identifier. You could also use the international standard code that is provided, and you can find that at Library of Congress site, and with the identifier associated with that particular service. So on with all these research that we have gained so far, we began to test our data. And our favorite example was Ms. Jen Alston's work. So in 2013, we extracted about less than 100 Jen Alston works and to see what we can do. We inputted IRI in the Sapphire Zero. At the same time, we have the string stream-based IRI in the system. We populated in the name heading, subject heading, and the tracing, which is now the 700 area. We loaded about 500 Cepheid 0 in our Voyager back in 2013. And to our surprise and perhaps a sigh of relief, we didn't break the system. It just simply be there. It just simply there. Our web services did not even notice. And so nobody shout out, say, "What are you doing?" So we sort of let it sit for a little bit. Because we didn't move forward with it because we didn't quite understand the impact of a identifier in a IRI HTTP environment. And the reason we finally settled that if we were to move forward, putting identifier in our iOS Voyager, we were up to do HTTP IRI. And these are some of the reasons that convince us that is the route to go. And one opportunity came, and I think that all of you probably have that in your environment. In 2014, August, our steering committee, GW is part of the Washington Research Library Consortium. One of the initiatives that was set out by the steering committee as its 2015 initiative was to develop and implement a plan that will successfully transition libraries' bibliographic record to a new library system platform, including consolidating into a single record addressing authority control and the implementation of RDA. Now, one of the very first things was identified by the metadata committee was perhaps, most of you are not unfamiliar with, is the reclamation process with OCLC. So I don't think I need to go into detail what reclamation does or is. So we began our reclamation project in October 2014. We initiated a process, but the whole project didn't actually start until January because we used that about 3 months process to identify strategies, develop a plan, and how it will be workable with limited staff that we have. And also throughout this process, I've been talking to Terry Reese because back in August of 2014, he had in mind to begin populating his ModEdit suite, additional tools to prepare libraries for linked data. And the first thing he put in that tool was BibFrame transformation tool. So had it not for ModEdit, we had to go through grueling process of writing code in Perl, which that I'm familiar with, utilizing a series of Perl modules like libcurl, library clean URL protocol, or LWP, library web in Perl, to query data against RDF services. From March to May, as soon as we get report back from OCLC, we know that our data has passed OCLC. Our next step is we need to put our data back into our system. So at that time, we were thinking, if we were to do that, we're gonna take this opportunity to enhance our data. The reclamation project, essentially, we were thinking of doing close to 2 million GW records, but we have parsed it out in phases, and that the phase 1 was almost 1 million bit records It actually is 999,785 type records. So it's a little bit shy of 1 million records for physical pieces. So that's mean book, serial, DVD, CD, CD-ROM, and all of the above. We left out electronic resources because we were advised to do it differently. So that's where we are right now. Through that process, we talked to Terry Reese and worked with him and troubleshooting, and he made available these tools, which is fabulous, fabulous. We ran through our records, and we select the Sapphire Zero that we wanted to input. The services that he made available through his link data lookup, the triple stores that are available is humongous. But we just wanted to test to see if we just have one and what it would do. And I must tell you, with 5 dedicated machines, 3 plus a troubleshooter, so that 4 staff member, dedicated staff member, that months of July and August was sleepless night for many of us there. Now, Terry Reese recently also added command line process, and that is tremendously helpful because I am a command line person, so I can stack the command and feeding my 390 files at different time. And so from the last week of June to the last week of August, there's a reason why we had to get it done was because the school starting the first week of September. And we have to make sure all our records are accessible and ready for our students. And this is what you will see before July 26th, I think. This is what before our actual replacement took place. And we couldn't have done this without our WRLC colleagues standing alongside and being with us. I think the latest late work was like 10 p.m. And I work early hours, so when I get up at 5, I saw my files. So that already worked out very well. Our record right now had gone through RDA, so our records are RDA compliant with Sapphire Zero HTTP IRI available. And as of September 1st, this is our stats, close to 4 million Sapphire Zero in our Voyager data. 99.35% of them resulted from our reclamation project. I think this is really doable, and need a little bit of organizational, talking through with your administrator, talking through with your team. If you really are fretting this program inside of the activities, talk to your programming IT folks. It doesn't take them that long to come up with a solution. So for now, this point forward, for us, we could worry less of a lot of the process that are traditional, cataloging, data management process, but we could begin to focus on the following: understanding what type of ontologies, ID services are out there, the vocabulary allow us to do a different type of data modeling so that we can serve our communities, broaden their horizon. We begin to understand what linked data ecosystems will enable our researchers to have their research exposed, to have their research be elevated to the level that they are easily found. And the metadata that we are creating right now reach beyond our library walls. And the technology that was associated with this will work efficiently with the data. And this is not just library data. This is data across the globe. And this activity, like Nancy alluded it earlier, have been noted by PCC. And PCC called a task group together with a fine group of members. And it's an extremely stellar group of professionals serving as consultants. This team's gonna take us some time for this team to come together making recommendations, but we are making good progress in terms of looking through what's out there, what's being done, and what is feasible. And one thing that it's really in our mind is when we make a recommendation, it will be an incremental recommendation for change. It will not be something so drastic that the rug will be pulled under your feet and you have nothing to hold on to. Now, how many of you are Xlibra customers that are using either Primo or Alma? Oh, not many. Okay, how many of you are Circe customers? Okay, now then, this just came out. If you are a user, customers of Xlibra that are using Alma and Primo, a call has gone out this Monday. Okay, Circe Dynex has provided a widget in their Blue Cloud for libraries to generate identifiers associated with that entity that they are creating. Mind you, this is for discovery. What I shared earlier is the raw data that we are providing our users and our IT folks. This, it's great for Circe and Xlibra, but they don't come down to our local system. They stay with the discovery layer. What I am promoting is for all of us, if you can find a way to get it in your system, whichever it may be. It could be Sapphire Zero, it could be Sapphire L, Sapphire. Follow the standard. Your library discovery team would love this, because when we made an announcement internally, by the way, this is the first public forum I'm sharing this, so you are the first to know. This is not widely known that GW had almost 4 million Sapphire Zero in HTTP actionable IRI in the system. In fact, when we started it, we checked with Library of Congress. Library of Congress has less than 200 Sapphire Zero embedded, and they are not HTTP IRI. So this is really phenomenal for our discovery team. They are writing program because this has just happened like last month. So we are waiting to see how this will impact our service. But as I'm sharing earlier, when we tested it in 2013, nothing happened, okay? So you will not break your system, I don't think. So, test it, and then let it be known that there is this subset, this is this pilot, and see what your discovery team can do with it. And I must say that GW wasn't the single institution in this country testing it. There are many people testing it. We are just probably the first one put it in production. And this is our retrospective process for reclamation. But for the ongoing new incoming title, we are running through MarcEdit, Sapphire, the link data tool. Now, I know for sure European libraries are doing this locally. It's just right now simply because Cepheid 0, the URI, the IRI, the format to use in a mock environment hasn't been settled. So a lot of people are still not sure how to contribute this data back into a utility such as OCLC. And like I shared earlier, you saw OCLC said no to Cepheid 0. So a lot of these things are all happening locally. Swedish Library, the National Library of Spain, German National Library, British Library. These are the libraries that we should be keeping tab on what they're doing locally. And soon enough, hopefully, all these data in individual system will benefit all of us at large. So I'm gonna leave you this that I love. There is a tide in the hairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and miseries. And on such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current way it serves, or we lose our fortune. Ventures. Sorry. This is from Shakespeare, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. Thank you.
Thank you to both Nancy and Jackie, and I'd invite both of them to come up. I think we have time for about 2 questions. I don't want to...
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry.
2 or 3 questions, and then we can run into lunch, so we'll start over there with Chris.
Hey, Jackie.
Hi, Carla.
I remember 1 year ago, we both talked to Google Scholar, Dr. Arturio, who is the founder of the Google Scholar.
Google Scholar. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we lobby him to help library to come up with more meaningful indexing way in the Google Scholar so that make a library resource available in that great platform.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I remember he mentions about is the question of URI.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned about IRI. Do you think that's gonna answer his question that one day everything will just with one unique identifier, so that like it will not be mixed with the if our library say subject heading or name heading want to link to Wikipedia, one day they can really talk to each other with the unique code. Is that possible?
I think right now you can see that example in VF. That is in aggregated services collecting all the identifiers established by multiple national library services for one single entity in one place. So how it does essentially will play out is where I think Dorothea mentioned, we need to figure out what it would be the authoritative service that we will promote and use. Now, when I say the word IRI, I mean that you use a script. You notice that the script was different when you were using a Unicode versus non-Unicode. So that's for machine to translate. If you were to use IRI with the same value, and then your system cannot read IRI, it will translate. The thing within this environment, the machine, we were expecting machine to work smarter. I'm sorry, Dorothea. we had this expectation that machine should be using smarter, so that will take our IRI if your local system cannot ingest IRI to get it back into the URI. So you still can get to where you need to go.
Okay. I just noticed in a record in 100 field there are 2 subfield 0.
When 2013, we have actually 3 or 4 or 5.
Okay.
Because we're testing.
So each of them...
They're all the same.
They all
lead to the same
okay.
authority data. It's just the form differently.
Okay.
They're HTTP versus string that using paren and then the alphanumeric identifier value.
Okay, get it. Last question is... Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I will ask you later.
We have a question over here.
Hi, Jackie. Earlier, hi. Earlier, you mentioned that you had chosen not to add IRIs, or at least not through MarcEdit, for your e-resources because something else was recommended. Could you describe that?
Yes. I think because we have such a composite practices over the years for electronic resources, and it's rather difficult, and maybe it's easier for you, but it was quite difficult for my team to really figure out okay, back to the sense of we're talking about ISBN, reuse of ISBN. When we are searching for one ISBN, and then we realize, oh, this is actually print ISBN, but we brought up electronic resource bib record. So then it actually had multiple records, and then we have to go deeper to figure it out. Is this the right ISBN for this right e-resources? So that's why we decided to hold off on the electronic resources through this process. However, we were recommended to use Collection Manager in WMS to set our holding that our ER team uses to set GW's electronic resource subscriptions. But our recent discovery, and I can share with you that our master matcher, Sherry Chen, is in the audience. She uses SQL to query all these data and let us, really lead us through this process. We usually spend a month or two looking at data before we decide what to do. So right now we are still in the investigation process. And so what we are doing is that we've discovered Collection Managers says we have this many titles selected of this many in this set. Then we check with Zero Solutions, which we have more. Then when we request the MARC records to examine from OCLC's Collection Managers, we actually got less. So OCLC said we had 311. We actually get only MARC records 289. But in our local system, we already had 396. And Zero Solutions said we have 615. So then said, what do we actually have? So I went to the vendor. Vendor said, no, you have 622. So right now, we are just pulling our hairs, trying to deal with this electronic resources. So I'm so glad that we forego electronic resources when we first did our reclamation. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are right now, and I wouldn't be sharing with you. So
I think we have time for one more question. Is there anyone else?
Don?
I was wondering if you talked to any authority vendors. I wondered if you talked to any authority vendors, Jackie, so that we all don't have to reinvent the wheel and do what you're doing.
Interesting thing. I think they will be out of business. I'm sorry. No. One of the things is a serendipitous discovery for us. Sherry Chen found that, and I didn't even realize it. When GW's activities all tied in, all our services tied in with our Voyager. But we are so lean. A lot of our records weren't touched for the last 20 years. Okay? So a lot of our headings are so out of date. We didn't know what to do because we simply don't have the manpower or we don't have that attention span, so to speak, to tackle this huge problem. So I was talking to Terry Rees, and RDF, which it's really interesting. I remember when I was querying using LWP, querying Amazon.com servers for in copyright out of print title. So when you query data, SQL, you can get back not just your your authorized heading. You could get back all the references. So what happened is our heading was old. So when we send in for query, it actually found in not the authorized heading, but it got back the authorized heading to our system. So what was brought to my attention was because we rely on a lot of gifts. We have donor information, and we have to identify donors' name entry as donor. And so when we're doing this second phase of our reclamation project was to have to insert back the field saying so-and-so is a donor. Okay, so we recognize this particular donor and his name was different. So we said to ourselves, how in the world this happened? We didn't make any changes on his heading. His name came back with a junior. Well, early on was just his name and his year, but now his junior is indeed inserted in between. And so we was like, let's see what else happened here. So that was our experience. Now, we never talk to an authority vendors because we are not in the position to talk to authority vendors for our process. So a lot of this process is, we're still in the testing mode. We do not know what the future holds. We just know that let's give it a go and see where we are. And if this is totally disastrous, fortunately, it was okay with our AUL. That was the thing. Our AUL okayed it. And before we actually started on July 26, we actually froze we have a snapshot of our Voyager data cutoff at July 25th. So if we broke the system, we can revert it. We have a safety net. So fortunately, we didn't need to do that.
And so our final speaker for today is Linda Wen, who joins us from the Washington College of Law at American University, where she is the head of collections and bibliographic services. Her previous professional experiences includes a term as the head of IT at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. She has significant research experience in e-resources metadata, technical services workflows, and integrated library systems. And welcome, Linda.
Okay, can you hear me? Good. Okay, let's get started and get over with it. I've been quite nervous all this morning, and the beauty about the last speaker is I don't have much to add. A lot of these already been covered this morning, so I will be fast. Again, my name is Linda Wen. I'm sorry about my on the speaker description. I did not mention I'm from Washington College of Law, American University. Okay, we will talk about linked data today. Linked data is a network of RDF statement expressed using published vocabulary, and which is usually referred to as triples. consists of a subject, predicate, and object, or in other words, entity, the property, and the relationship and the property value. And so we have a triple statement, like a person is the author of the work, or the work is a genre of science fiction. And when we talk about linked data, we talk about the URIs, and the subject, predicate, and object usually are resolved, are identified by a URI and resolved to authoritative vocabulary. And all these entities and triples can be interconnected with each other. And so every entity will have a bunch of properties circled around, and then we will have an entity graph. So it's look like this. So for a computer, it doesn't know what a Mona Lisa is, just a string. But with all the IDs around property relationship around it, this name becomes a thing, got a life. So the computers got to know what it is about. So the string becomes a thing. For the computers, the things will have a URI, which point to an authoritative vocabulary. So this kind of resemble what we librarians do with authority control, except that the authority vocabulary is all of you identified by URIs. So the libraries have been busy doing identifying its entities with all the properties around, and they interlink to each other. So we will have these graphs connected with each other. And we will have this, ideally, all this world, when the authoritative vocabulary hubs connected to each other, we will have this famous linked data cloud. And we can take a look. So this is to the site of this open linked cloud. And if I click on it, I can see the details. And I want to take a look at what the library's been doing. We'll see the center of the cloud is DBpedia, and we will see some very famous names among the library and the publisher community. Let's see, maybe it's better this way. Okay, the green part, the green section is the green section consists of the hubs contributed by the library and the publisher communities. That takes about, 20% of the cloud. So that's where we are now. And outside the library community, there are some example famous linked data players. Well, Google Knowledge Card. I do a search to go a Mockingbird, and we will see a list on the left of the links to the documents. And the right-hand side is more of a graph or more of an entity relationship. And the Google kind of already answered some of the users' questions. And that also tells us about that even Google is go through this coexist path. On one side is the traditional, and on the other side is trying to do the linked data model. And a big player of this Google Knowledge Graph is Wikipedia. We will see that later. And if I do a Wikipedia search, one thing I want to point out is that we have this link to OCLC. I mean, link to the OCLC record right here. And towards the end, the link data listed that OCLC already published it. So every OCLC record, whatever search you do, towards the end, the link data. And we will add this page, we'll see that we have these predicate and objects listed, and some of the authoritative hub names listed. For example, schema. Okay, and another example I want to talk about is BBC. BBC has already publishing its vocabulary and ontology, and also populated all their websites. And this played a big role during the Olympic Games. And so every athlete, every team has its own website generated with all the dynamic games and the statistics listed. And we can take a look at the mapping of the ontology of BBC. And on the top, in the prefix, we see some of the big names of the authoritative ontology. And towards in the middle, I want to show everybody is the, take a look at the core concept, ontology, and there is a graph of how the structure of the BBC site. And on the right, you see the entities, person, place, events, organizations, and themes. Some of these overlap with what we're talking about in the library. So, okay, and we this morning talked about that linked data graphs and change the data from, like, for example, the graph on the left is like resemble what we have as a record. And on the right hand, with all the URIs, so the record has become puzzle pieces. The puzzle pieces can then reconnected with other puzzle pieces and become other websites or another group of knowledge communities. So that gives us a bunch of benefits of linked data. It's easier to get updated and less human errors and dynamic updating, and also less maybe application cost. I listed here some of the early players of the linked data vocabulary, and if you take a look at any of the linked data example, record example, you see these links, these names. And this BibFrame vocabulary is what we know, what we're most familiar with. And let's take a look at the category view, which is more for the catalogers. And probably you will find a journal title being absorbed by another journal title, such kind of properties. And Library of Congress BibFrame initiative welcome cataloger librarians' feedback. I think by now probably everybody has seen this image. It's talking about the how to prepare the data, and is your data 5-star, which means is your data out in the web, and is your data machine processable? For example, if it's an image of PDF file, it's not machine processable. It's better as in a CSV file. And your data, is it confined in your ILS rather than with all the links which can be queried by outside of the library community? So library and data entities, this image is from OCLC. So OCLC is focused on the key entities, person, place, organization, concept, work, and events. And take a look at the data, what we have in the library. I think we can categorize them into these 4 groups: and library authority files, labeled names, and half-structured and unstructured text. As I mentioned before, that with URIs, data with URIs resolved to vocabulary, the process or the concept resemble what we have been doing. So, authority control. So the focus or the center of the easy part is of all those 4 categories. The authority file probably is the concentration of our work, because it's already have these links to authority control records. So I would like to talk about several examples. So on the top is one authority record we are familiar with the 010 field. This is both Library of Congress and OCLC have been using this set, like ISBN numbers, LCCN numbers. This already been transferred to be URIs. And what about the rest of these? For example, 150 is put in the 650 bib record, and so it has a link if we can apply an identify to the 150, but the 450s are unauthorized terms, and 550s is easier, because with the subfield WG, we can use the SCOS or SKOS broader property to identify those. So this, for the concept or subject headings, there's a resemble. We can deal with those authority records and make them URIs. But what about the names, person, authority records? I have one example for Stephen King here. Take a look at the bottom in SKOS URI. And first, it identifies it's a person name as concept. And for other languages, translation of the name, it gives a alt label and or C also for pen names. So an authority record versus URI, the URI doesn't tell the main label that the rest of them are actually property of the person. So it's different from the subject headings. And I think OCLC has been thinking about this, so it's trying to use a friend of a friend standard to deal with this kind of problems. So still at the bottom, you see in friend of a friend standard, a person's name is in the person label, and then the rest of them, including the pen name, other versions or other language of the name as the properties. Other libraries, they are big library communities, have been busy converting the library data to linked data. And let's take a look at the British National. Okay, so here they list some examples what you can do with the linked data. Take a look at the sample queries. So the population possibilities is endless. So if I'm interested in 50 author born in 1945, or I can put my own labels, own query codes down here, and I will have the result here, a list of authors born in that year. And because the born year and the author's name and all the author's works, they're all different. They become different identities, puzzle pieces. So I can reassemble them and package them as different result. And one thing I want to mention about Oslo Public Library is that library is already dropped MARC. So if you're interested, take a look at their catalog and see how they're doing. And also you can query their data. Well, we are having this meeting in Library of Congress, so we're all very familiar with this BibFrame. BibFrame, I've been thinking about this BibFrame. BibFrame divide the records up, and so they like. So the BibFrame is like giving you all this bucket for the different fields. So for the work entity, I am thinking that these records can belong to that bucket. And for instances, and library holdings, lastly, annotations. And all these, when these are become divided and put in those buckets, and all these can then also be assigned URIs and then linked to other entities. I think that's the record we just saw. And here's a little tool that if you want to get the feet wet, you can compare a MARC record and to the total expression of linked data. So it's quite easy to use. You just need to use the Library of Congress record number. It's not the regular 001 record number. Okay. So we talk about this the tool to compare, and also you can you have a MARC to BibFrame transformation service, MARC frame editor. Maybe let's take a brief look at the editor. Here's a demonstration site, so you don't even have to register, and you can just play with it. Okay, so say I have a copy of some work, or a copy of an instance of a work, and I can just, this is like copy cataloging, and if I'm looking for, say, sea level rising, it would give you a list of all the records which already have at the Library of Congress. It's just not working today. And I'm experiencing it, and I would like this left encode instead of this keyword search. So let's see. It's not working. So when you done, you can download the record, take a look. So let's see. And at the bottom of that list is MARC Next, which is the Jackie talked about this morning. It's the new function in MARC Edit. And this looks quite familiar, and I can demonstrate it. It's on my computer, or I have several slides. So if I click on that MARC Next, I have this list of tools there. I'll first talk about the test bed. And I used it to test it out. And for example, I was interested in how that sea level rising book looks like as in BibFrame format. So I download that record, and I click on this test bed, and I can specify the base URL as your local or as other authoritative ontology URL there. And then if I press it, it says file has been processed. It's quite straightforward. When I open it up, I have this MARC record transformed to this new format. Okay, so link identifier. This is a very handy tool that you can already be doing. you can embed this in the regular workflow, like Jackie talked about this morning. Say also you have a mark record, and you want to insert all the subfield zeros from different sources. Right now they have this Library of Congress, OCLC-YF, and the pull-down list is very long, and I don't think every one of them are working now, but these 4 listed here are working. So depending on which one you trust. So after I process it, the subfield zeros inserted. So if you also want to do Jackie's project in your library, you can try using the mark next. It's quite straightforward, just 1, 2, 3 steps. And this is the original fields for the mark record. So by comparison, you see the subfield zeros inserted automatically. Okay, as I said, I'm a learning cataloger, so I want to get my feet wet, half wet maybe. So I would like to recommend one tour. It's a very important tour. Sparkle. It's like SQL to regular database. Sparkle is to link the data. So Sparkle queries across databases and pull structured or semi-structured data, and or even explore data by querying unknown relationship and transform RDF data from one vocabulary to another. So that's all the good functions that it's designed for linked data. So this is a DBpedia site, and everybody can go there and query DBpedia, which is the structured data version of Wikipedia. You can query whatever triples they have there. Maybe let's try one. Let's see. So I'm trying to, let's see, I want to know Library of Congress, all the predicates and objects. Of course, I'll limit to, let's say, 100. Otherwise, it's endless. So let's take a look. Go right here. Okay. So because Library of Congress is in Wikipedia, so I can query what's all about Library of Congress behind the scene. So I come here to the DBpedia site, and I writing a line of code, a very simple code, and I got 100 pieces of statement there. And as we mentioned before, because all the linked data can be recombined and packaged, so the possibilities endless. So you can query whatever. And let's see, say, say I'm on Wikipedia, and maybe I'm interested in that. Let's see, I can, copy this. They have been using this in the URL. That's that piece of information. They have been using that as a URI actually. So let me try to replace Library of Congress and try that. Oops. See what I get. I got the information of this piece of news just came out. Okay, so probably instead of you asking me questions, I would like to ask you questions. That's easier. So I've been thinking about the future descriptive practice or future cataloging workflow. So it will very much different. For example, the crowdsourcing, because a lot we have for this library experience, like working in the library, we have all this expertise. And compared to the level of cataloging with MARC, we would think how detailed the linked data will be. So maybe take the coexisting dual path, maybe using the follow what the big names, OCLC, Library of Congress been doing, and also we as individual librarians, we contribute. So crowdsourcing the description of the most prominent, actually, the library resources consist of the most prominent creative work in the world. See, example is we have New York Public Libraries. They have this linked jazz project. So crowdsourcing using all regular people and users and librarians, labeling all the pieces, jazz pieces, so that the system or the computer can query and can assign URIs to those information. Thinking of the next day or future, there are more questions like digital or unpublished information. What do we do with that? And it's like, it seems, for example, OCLC, we take a look at the end of every record. There is a category as linked data, and you will see schema.org. So we kind of depending on other authoritative hub from other communities. So it's like a social contract that how much we can trust them. So that's about what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Before we start our question and answer period, we just wanted to note that you still have an opportunity to vote. We noticed that there was a discrepancy in the number of ballots versus the number of registrants. So you still have an opportunity to vote until we announce the results. So if you need a ballot or if you have not submitted your ballot, please raise your hand and someone will come around to you and pick that up. This isn't Chicago, so no voting early and often, just early. So I'd like to open the floor if Linda will accept questions from the audience. Please just raise your hand.
Hello, Linda.
Hi.
Kim Kiley. I'm from the Library of the United States Supreme Court. And I was just wondering if you think that there are any particular or special challenges in law librarianship when we think about linked data.
About the law librarianship. Oh, very good question. As I said, I'm a learning cataloger, and I am kind of new in the law library. So for the law libraries is very heavy with periodicals.
Right.
Yeah, with all the like embargo period and name changes. I think that will be very challenging. And also the periodicals goes to electronic formats more and more. And also we talked about the ISBN numbers and all the challenges. From a subject heading point of view, I don't have much to say, but from the maybe from the system or technology point of view, I would like to say I trust the ability of the technology. For example, the BibFrame and all the ontology vocabularies out there, the property or the relationship, like is author of or resolved by, all the properties are expanding, dramatically expanding, and we as librarians can contribute our point of view to take care of those details. So I would like to say I trust the technology.
Very good. Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions for Linda? Move one over.
Yes, you said something about what new skills catalogers need in the new environment, but you only touched on sparkles. So can you elaborate on the other skills?
The reason I listed just one is so that we are not overwhelmed. I just feel I highly recommend Sparkle because of all the functions that Sparkle offers. It can query the triples and across different modules. So for other skills, I think XML. Yeah, I think that's about from my point of view. Scripting language. At the conferences, I heard people who create applications or tools they all mentioned that they want to attract more people creating tools. So we are in the library community, we are lack of tools, a lack of people who creating tools. For example, if I go to BibFrame testbed editor and I want to look for the subject headings, and I have this list of headings. What if I want other authoritative hubs? I want to query the other authoritative sources. What do I do? Does that can be a project, or can be people can create tools and embed it there, and so it will connect to other communities or other group or hubs of authoritative vocabulary.
Any other questions? Thank you all, and thank you so very much, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and thanks to all of our speakers today. And now a tradition at the PTPL annual meeting, and for her last duty on the PTPL advisory board, I would like to present you with Linda Geisler, who will present the historical moment.
Hi, as Mark announced, this will be my last duty, I guess, I performed for PTPL. So we're coming to the end of the 91st meeting of the Potomac Technical Processing Librarians. I'm happy to provide just a brief historical moment. While I was thinking about what to select, I did some searching on the PTL website, and I actually found a list of all the members that had served as a chair of PTPL. And since we're here at Library of Congress today, I was wondering, well, how often or how active have Library of Congress staff been in this organization? And I was kind of pleasantly surprised to find that there's actually been 9 chairs from the Library of Congress in PTPL. Actually, the very second chair of PTPL was Charles Meltel, which was, I believe that was in 1924. And many of you may know him. He's quite well known because he was a chief classifier. And when the decision was made to develop a Library of Congress classification, he oversaw the development of the new system based on the existing million-volume collections at the Library of Congress in 1897. Over the years, they've had other chairs. 1935 to 36 was Theodore Muller. 1948 to 49 was Werner Ellinger. Other chairs include Robert R. Holmes, 1963 to 64. Alice F. Toomey from 1969 to 70. She was actually a well-known reference librarian that worked on a world bibliography of bibliographies between 1964 and 1964 through 74, right? Another member was Arthur Lieb, who was very active in our prints and photographs collection. We actually have 3 that were chair, I guess, during what I would call like our recent 30-year period. Some of them actually still work here at Library of Congress. One of them was Andrew Lisowski, who was the chair from 1985 to 86, and he works in automation with our ILS program office. I saw that Vera Clyburn was here today, who was our chair in 2011, and she's the current chief of our U.S. Arts, Sciences, and Humanities Division. And of course, I'm the last one for right now, but I'm sure by showing this history that we will probably continue to have many Library of Congress staff involved in PTPL. as was a recurring theme at the meeting today, education, professional development, training is a very important part for our profession. And I just think PTPL does a really great job in providing an opportunity for all of us. It also enables us to be involved locally with other colleagues all over the metropolitan area, Maryland, Virginia, DC, and to network with all different types of libraries. I mean, we have academic, federal, state, private, public, and I've just found that it's a very convenient way to maintain currency and learn of changes in the field as it relates to technical processing. Anyway, with that very positive thought, I'm certainly hopeful that Library of Congress will continue its relationship with PTPL. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.